His face was white as snow, and pure as finest gold. It had the look of new, it had the look of old. I felt like I was home, but felt so far away. In fear I thought to leave, but felt the urge to stay. Then a silence fell, like none I've ever known. I stood among the millions, I stood there all alone. His face was like the sun, his eyes were like the sea, his voice was like the thunder rolling through eternity. I saw the Lord. He was high and lifted up and rightfully adored, and I saw the Lord, and He saw me. Then from sleep awakened, I looked into the night, the darkness overtaken by a bright and shining light. Oh, I couldn't understand it, and I couldn't reason how. Then my eyes beheld it, I wasn't dreaming now, and I saw the Lord. He was high and lifted up and rightfully adored, and I saw the Lord. He was high and lifted up and rightfully adored, and I saw the Lord. He was high and lifted up and rightfully adored, and I saw
Now hear these words of Scripture. For I know that good itself does not dwell in me, that is, in my sinful nature. For I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. For I do not do the good I want to do, but the evil I do not want to do, this I keep doing.
Today, we hear a text that maybe for you like me is one that you would just as soon avoid or not deal with. And I do my best to not read this text on a regular basis. And yet, somehow, I'm drawn to these words every time I hear them. They speak to me in a personal way about my own struggle with discipleship, with following Christ as He calls us to. I remember the words of Jesus when there's a man who comes to Him and says, "Lord, I will follow you wherever you go." And do you remember the words that Jesus says? He says, foxes have dens and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Still another setting when Peter, the rock upon which Jesus proclaims the church will be built, a faithful, wonderful, incredibly motivated man, Peter. And Jesus tells Peter and his disciples about his own coming suffering and death, the imminent danger that he is in, and that he will lose his life for the sake of the world. And do you remember Peter's words? He confronts Jesus and he says, "That will never happen to you. God forbid that anything should ever harm you in any way, Jesus." And Jesus says, "You are a stumbling block to me. For you do not have in mind the things of God, but rather the things of the world." Then Jesus told his disciples this, "If anyone would come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross, and then come and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for my sake will find it." The things he knows he should do, and the very thing he knows he shouldn't do, he does anyway. These words come from an incredibly righteous man, Paul. Wow, in comparison to any of us here, we would not measure up. Thanks be to God that that's not the way that God measures us, or loves us, or accepts us. We will all miss something crucial in this text, however, if we stop at the place of recognizing that we have and always will fall short. It's a truth that we have and will fall short. Paul reminds us of this in another place in Romans. He says, all have fallen short of God's glory. But the crucial thing that Paul is lifting up here is not that he does the very thing that he hates. The crucial thing is that he is saved by grace. He is saved by grace. You know, there's a difference for me. I'm much more apt to admit to something that I did, and I knew it was wrong, if I have a sense that this person that I'm admitting it to loves me anyway. Right? I don't know if you've had that experience, but I know when I was growing up, and I learned this quickly, because and sorry, Mom, I'm deviating here a little bit again, but I was much more reticent to admit something I did when I knew that a few moments later I would be told, "Go up to your room and wait for me there." Okay? Usually I would try to, bend the truth a little bit. Paul is talking about God's grace here. He's not focusing on his sin or his inability to follow Christ perfectly. You know what? And this is Paul's point. If we focus on that, we're going to fall short every time. And we're not going to be trying to grow and become better Christians, better followers of Christ. We will never be righteous outside of God's grace. This is what Paul is saying. he's comparing the law with grace. And he said, as long as there is the law, as long as we are living by the law, trying to get ourselves into that place where we know we need to be, I emphasize get ourselves, he said, we will always, like me, I will always do that which I don't want to do. I will not measure up. I ran across a song a few years back that just struck me. The artist is Greg Brown. I'm sure that probably nobody in this room has ever heard that name. But Greg Brown is a prolific songwriter, a folk singer. But I caught wind of a song that just really hit home for me. And it was titled, I Don't Know That Guy. And the first 3 verses go something like this. Me, I'm happy-go-lucky, always ready to grin. I ain't afraid of loving you, ain't fascinated with sin. So who's this fellow in my shoes, making you cry? I don't know that guy. Who took my suitcase? Who stole my guitar? And where's my sense of humor? What am I doing in this bar? This man who's been drinking and giving you the eye, I don't know that guy. I've heard him complaining. I've watched him do nothing and say he can't get enough. He'll blame his mama and daddy for the world passing by and say it with me, I don't know that guy. There's a few more verses to the song, but I won't bore you with those. In those times and places when I don't want to know that guy, Paul is reminding me and you that we need to trust in God's grace. The season of Lent is a season for us to be honest with God, to be honest with one another. And I don't know how much more powerful God's grace can be demonstrated than with the sacrament of Holy Communion. It takes us back to those words of Jesus when he says to his disciples, take and eat this bread. This is my body, which will be broken for you. And drink from this cup. This is the cup of salvation. My life, which will be poured out for you for the forgiveness of sin. As often as you eat of this bread and drink of this cup, Jesus says, remember me. And I think when he said, remember me, he meant for us to remember his teachings, to remember his life, to remember the sacrifice that he was willing to make for you, for me, and for all the people that have gone on before us and all the people that will go ahead of us. I honestly want to pay attention to who I am. I don't want to be saying, I don't know that guy over there. I want to be saying, yeah, that's me. And I'm in need of God's grace. My friends, don't allow anything in your life, anything that you've said or done or not done or left undone, don't allow those things to keep you from humbly bowing before the one who loves you and say, God, thank you for saving me and loving me, and help me, Lord, to be a new creature, to grow in some new ways. I'm hopeful that these branches up here in front of us will just begin to sprout leaves, and all of those leaves will represent you. And perhaps, feel free to give a leaf to someone else when you receive them. If you want two, take two. There will be plenty. And bring them back. You're not going to receive them today. I'm just kind of wetting the water here for you to be thinking about it. This is the first Sunday in Lent. 40 days of us coming back to God in some way, shape, or form. I want to offer the invitation to each and every one of us here from Jesus that we are invited to come and receive the bread and the cup. Receive a piece of bread, dip it in the cup, and take it in. Not as something symbolic, but as the real love of God shown through the life, the teaching, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus. You are invited.